Hey guys, it's your girl Eda. Aside from being the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast host, I am a legal consultant, author, and advocate for change within the legal industry. Every episode, we dive deep into the tools, strategies, and real world insights you need to succeed, featuring inspiring guests and topics that matter most to the modern legal profession. So, if you find value in these conversations, be sure to subscribe to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast and download our episodes for your commute, coffee break, or brainstorming session. And if you know someone who could benefit, don't forget to send them our way. Referrals are always welcome. Let's create a stronger, more empowered legal industry together. In this episode, we have a conversation that is long overdue in the legal profession. The power of introverts, overcoming performance anxiety, and embracing authenticity. Joining me is Heidi Brown, a law professor, author, and passionate advocate of well-being in the legal field. She's here to share how legal professionals can harness their strengths, manage public speaking anxiety, and create a career that aligns with their values. If you've ever felt the pressure to perform or conform, this episode is for you. Listen in for more. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. I'm super excited. So as you guys know, I rarely select guests to be on the podcast. We usually get applications or intake forms, or people just contact us to actually be on our podcast. But for the end of the season, I felt we needed to end it with a bang, and I wanted to select certain types of guests, and I wanted it to be geared to my vision because I'm crazy like that. I like to have a vision in my head and just like make it happen. And here I am. I was super excited. This is like the epiphany of like, don't be afraid to just ask and then hope and pray for the best. And Heidi was definitely on my top 100 guest list. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to send her a LinkedIn message and see if she says yes. And if no, no hard feelings. But she said yes. So I'm super excited to have Heidi. She's an author. She's just an all-around amazing person. I've been a fan for, I don't even know, many years. She's written, well, I know she's written 3 books that I love and adore, but I think she's written like other 3 books, more geared to specific things. But I fell in love with you at Introverted Lawyer. I'm not an introvert, actually, funny enough, but it was actually given to me by one of my clients. So they said, hey, listen, you really need to read this book. And I was like, that's so weird. I don't know why. And it's because at that time in my career, it was very early on. And I was very, okay, so I don't really know how to say this in a really nice way because I don't want to offend anybody, but I took the disc, that like personality. And I was a very high D. Like I was so dominant in that D that I didn't really see anything else, right? So leadership skills, consulting really didn't mesh with that personality because I was so gung-ho and so willing and wanting to help people around me and everything else, but I wasn't really listening to what other people had to say, right? Because I was so focused and it was a very tunnel vision mindset. And I think that's kind of why they sent me that book, to teach me, hey, this is what the other side looks like. And so let's talk about Introverted. There's another one, Fear Untamed. We have a brand new one, Flourishing Lawyer. I mean, there's so many out there, Heidi. For those of you that don't know who she is, I mean, at least introduce yourself. I don't know how you don't know her, but introduce yourself and then we'll talk about these amazing books.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. And by the way, I was very excited to get your message in my LinkedIn inbox. So I'm excited. So I'm a legal writing professor. I'm a professor at New York Law School in Manhattan. But before that, we were talking a little bit before we jumped on the podcast today. I was a construction lawyer right out of law school at the ripe old age of 24. Which was, by the way, 30 years ago. I started working in a construction litigation firm. And so it was like this very male dominated, rough and tumble industry. I loved the substantive work that I was doing, like problem solving. I had to learn how to read blueprints and learn how a sports stadium is built. But for like I write about in all my books, I really struggled with the performance aspects of my job. I was good at the legal research and writing and organizing and solving problems kind of in a quiet space. But every time they would send me out to do a deposition or go to court or like travel to negotiate something, I have this really robust blushing response. So my face would just be like on fire. And it was always, a bunch of men around the table, and they would see my face so red and they knew that they had gotten under my skin. And so I really had a hard time through 20 years of law practice. About around that time, actually like 15 years into that 20 years, I started teaching legal writing. I got this chance to start teaching law at the same time I was practicing law, which I highly do not recommend. I never slept that entire time.
I was gonna
But
say, did you sleep?
I noticed that my quietest students were my best legal writers. And so it kind of made me realize, oh, somebody's got to write about this or research this. And I figured I need to figure out myself first so then I could help my quiet students who were also struggling with speaking in class or getting cold called in class or trying out for like the trial competition teams or going on interviews. So that's what led me to write my first well-being book, which is called The Introverted Lawyer. It's still my favorite of all my books I've written because it's the first time I really sat down and wrote my own story, and about all those years and decades of really struggling with performance anxiety, but not understanding that I'm an introvert, which is different from being someone who's shy or scared to speak. But I have both, I have all three of those things. So as an introvert, I am quiet. I like to be alone. I like to work independently. But I also have a lot to say. So my friends are always like, "You're not an introvert," but I totally am. So just kind of like you said, reading about these different personality types and doing things like the DISC or like 16 personalities, I don't know if you've heard of the Values in Action Institute on Character, the Character Strengths Assessment
Oh, I'm
called
gonna
the
have to write that
VIA.
one. What
It's
is that one called?
viacharacter.org is their website, viacharacter.org, and it tells you
Mm.
what your top 5 signature strengths are. I feel like the more we talk about this with each other and get to know how my strengths are different from your strengths, but that doesn't make one of us cooler or better than the other. It's like, hey, this is how we can work better together if we have this shared vocabulary around our strengths and also the things that we don't like to do that much, but also
Right.
how to help each other get better at the things that we're not so great at, which is what led me to write like the Untangling Fear book about public speaking and performance anxiety, and then putting it all together in the most recent one, the Flourishing one.
I love that one. Actually, I didn't even know about that one until you told me about it. So I'm excited to add it to my book list. As you can tell, I'm a bookworm. I love to read. I love to research. I've always been that way since I don't even know, ever since I could remember at this point. I just, as soon as I saw Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and I didn't even care about the story. I just saw the library and I was like,
Oh my
that's what I
gosh.
want when I grow up. I just want that library.
Me
And
too. I love books and libraries and bookstores.
And my best friend just sent me like a video of that it actually exists. It's a real library somewhere in, I believe it's Australia or New Zealand. I'm not sure. But she's like, we're gonna have to do like a bestie trip, and I'm all for it. I'm like, yes, let's save up our savings, our life savings, and let's go. And I want to see this library. But
That's so
anyways,
funny. I text my friend Kelly, who is a similar bookworm like you and me, and she and I are constantly texting each other pictures of random libraries.
I love it. That's been my dream since literally Belle was introduced to me in my life. And it was just she was my favorite princess because of it, not because of anything else. She also was the first princess that spoke a different language. So for me, that was really important because I grew up in a bilingual home and I didn't see representation of any kind in Disney until I saw Belle when she started speaking French with her dad and everything. And it was all like and inspired me to actually learn about it and to actually, see what French was about. And so that's now my third language. So I was excited about that. But
Amazing.
my whole point to all this, I know I went off on a tangent here. On my 6-year-old self, I went back to like when I was 6. But my whole point is that books can actually unite people. And it's really funny to see a book on introverted, right? Like it's like, usually people that love books are very introverted or just love information, which In my case, that's me. And it's funny enough, then there's this other side of readers that are more for the fantasy, like novels and things like that, which I never have been. Sorry, guys, if I lost you. But I have always been that person, the Adam Grant, Brene Browns of the world. Like, I'm very intrigued on the mind. So, coming back to the full circle moment, on flourishing, this kind of brings me back to what we're talking about now is our different facets, right? Like I used to be a dancer when I grew up. I was never afraid to be on a stage. I was never afraid to speak in front of people. I would just always been the way I am. It's not something that was not normal for me, or I was hesitant. Not that I don't get nervous, not that I don't, have the jitters sometimes when I'm like in this massive stage. Like when I was at CleoCon, I freaked out because there was like thousands of people. I didn't know I was in the second biggest room, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. So like everything was like the pressure, right? And it was just a big moment for me, right? Because that was also on my bucket list. So it's like nice to just kind of soak it in. And of course I was nervous. Like I'm not gonna sit here and be like, no, it was like a walk in the park. No, absolutely not. Like these headlights and you're being recorded, and it felt like a TED talk, really, honestly.
Right,
And
right.
so it's like, you're at this moment in your life, and you have these different things. And so I just tapped into like what I call my dancer mindset. Okay, we're ready to go. Like set it up, you're suited up, you're ready to go, music's on, it's showtime. And so I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode so far, as this podcast is just the beginning. At Eda Rosa LLC, we specialize in helping law firms and legal teams thrive with tailored staff training, operations management, and team building solutions. Whether you're looking to streamline your practice or elevate your team's potential, we're here to help. So visit www.edarosallc.com. That's www.edarosallc.com. When you're talking about this one, the flourishing lawyer, you're talking about those different parts of you, right? You're not just that legal professional. You're not just that analytical, strategical, A-type personality. Most of us are. That's how we thrive in the legal industry. Perfectionism is a really big one for us, which is why we have such high turnover, burnout, anxiety, so on and so forth. So for me anyway, it's helped me tapped into my other sides, right? My dancer, my artistic side, my, journaling side, because I love to write in general. It's helped me with my professional life. It's helped me with my professional and personal relationships. So I'm just interested to see kind of what your train of thought on all that is.
Absolutely. I mean, what led me to write the flourishing one is I was trying, I think, through the introverted book and the fear book at the time I was writing those books, I put myself in boxing lessons for the first time in my life because all of my performance anxiety resulted in me, in addition to the blushing, I was either holding my breath or over or like hyperventilating. And you can't perform no matter what type of performance you're doing. So I started really studying. Well, I had a boxing coach. I still have a boxing coach. His name is Lou. He's changed my life because
Go, Lou!
he taught me how to breathe. And I had a lesson this morning. And again, my natural bodily instinct is to freak out and either hyperventilate or not breathe. And every single time he's trained me, you got to, do all these rituals. So in researching and writing The Flourishing Lawyer, I wanted to think of legal professionals like athletes, or if the athlete or sports model doesn't work for some people, think of themselves like their favorite performer. Like you mentioned dancing. Like I'm a huge fan of the rock band U2. So like Bono is like my,
Yes,
superhero.
okay.
And everybody's got a different one, right? Like some people like Taylor Swift, Beyonce, whoever, country singers, whatever your affinity is toward, choose a person in that realm that inspires you, because athletes and performers, like the ones we all get excited about, don't just focus on that one skill. Like you said, like lawyers, we need to focus on or legal professionals, this is inclusive. Legal professionals need to focus on their intellect for sure, but like athletes and performers, we should also focus on multiple other dimensions. And so that book, So there's a national task force on lawyer well-being or legal professional well-being, and they had identified 6 dimensions. And some of them are kind of the obvious ones, like physical, emotional, social. I think they included occupational, intellectual, and spiritual. And then because you mentioned being an artist, I love to write. I write every day. I love to journal. And I have this like creative streak, but I felt like the law firm life kind of suppressed that in me a bit, but I found that when I was tapping into my inner artist, I would be able to solve legal problems better. I was more creative. So my book adds like an artistic dimension, and a couple other dimensions, like a cultural dimension. You mentioned studying different languages. I mean, there's literal science on how like studying languages can boost our well-being. So the book is like it invites us to treat ourselves like athletes or performers, to think about who our favorite performers are, and maybe even research like what their routines and rituals are for nurturing these multiple dimensions, and then figuring out for us as legal professionals how we can do that. And it doesn't need to take, tons and tons of time. It could be 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, just focusing on one new dimension that we may have neglected recently, and just really being open to discovering how it makes us feel better. And at the time I was writing this book, I went back to school and I got my master's in applied positive psychology. So there is science to back up all the different strategies and techniques in the Flourishing Lawyer book. I mean, I'm a proud self-help author. Like I needed self-help books to get myself through some really tough times in my life. So I'm not ashamed to admit, like I'm all about self-help techniques. And though this Flourishing Lawyer book grounds it in the science of psychology principles and performance psychology and positive psychology, to show that, there's research to back up why this stuff actually works.
Yeah, and I think, it's so funny because I'm in the middle of finishing mine. Hopefully, it'll be done by October, which is called Silent Burdens, right? So it talks
Wow.
about the emotional secondary trauma that legal professionals we do, especially, the legal professionals that work in criminal and family and immigration. These are tough cases. Personal injury, in my case, was the one that triggered me. And so there's a lot of my experiences and sharing my stories. And so when like this book, I'm totally gonna read because it sounds like super aligned to like what I'm in the middle of finishing.
That's so
And so
exciting.
it
Congratulations.
is. Thank you. It's my third book as well, but like you, I think it's going to be my version of the introverted lawyer because it's the first book that I've actually personalized. Most of them are more like guidebooks or what you would call the self-help book or whatever, and for legal professionals. But the other one was like a co-authored one, and it talked about, skills and everything like that. It talked about the legal skills of everything. But this one's more about the emotional, mental health, everything that we go through, which is unspoken, right? Like, I
True.
didn't know what I was going through as a legal professional. I didn't know why I felt a certain way, why this one case would keep me up at night, and what was really happening through my hormonal imbalances and my mental status. And like you said, I triggered, for me, it was yoga. I love yoga. I love meditating, Pilates, anything that has to do with, body, mind, and soul. So that was my savior, right? That was my self-help.
Huge.
And I
Mhm.
leaned into Melody. I can't remember her last name.
Melody
Oh,
Beatty?
Beatty.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
Beatty.
yes.
I love her. So, journal prompts, the whole 9 yards. I joined a social club for entrepreneurs. Like, I went all out. My husband was looking at me like I was nuts, but I was like, I'm crazy and I need to fix myself. No, I'm just kidding. But, I feel the more research I do, I feel females really tap into this at a certain period of their time. And according to the research I'm doing, it's anywhere from the ages of 25 to 45 is really where we have that pivotal moment in our lives where we're like, we just wake up and we're like, what just happened? What did I do, the last 10 years? Where am I in my life? And why have I not accomplished half of the things I've wanted to accomplish, or whatever? We start questioning life and we start questioning our position, and start questioning our skills and education. And that's where the I'm not enough comes in, and
Mhm.
I'm scared of everything. And so I'm really excited to read this book. Honestly, I'm about to buy it like as we're talking.
Thank
But
you. I can't wait to buy your book. And you're so right
I
about like we need to write our stories because
yeah.
you use the words, I think, unspoken and unseen. like
Yeah.
we're bringing in out into the light, things that we've all kind of kept hidden or haven't said aloud because of fear, or as you mentioned, trauma, like the layers of trauma that so many of us have experienced through relationships and or bullying or lack of civility in the legal profession or family strife. It's so hard, and it like layers on top of layers on top of layers, and it's so much work that we need to do together to like peel back all those layers and speak about it, even if it's unpretty.
Yes.
Our stories
And
are
it's
going to be
something we're not
messy.
taught. We're not
Yes.
taught. We're not taught to feel our feels and, really go through those emotions. Like we're always either toughen up buttercup or like get over it. Why are you
Yeah.
so distressed about it? And it's like the more you suppress it, the more you ignore it, the worse it gets because then something or someone comes along and starts triggering those
Yes.
suppressed feelings or traumas, and then that's never good, right? So, and then the cycle continues until someone breaks it. And so that's where generational trauma comes in and all that stuff. So, like you, I also went through my master's. I graduated last year and I did a master's in law with a concentration in education. So I learned a lot about our education system and why it is the way it is. And I'm going to leave it at that because this is not a political podcast. But there is a lot there. And so that also pushed me to say, no, I got to finish this book. I've been writing it for over a year now. I got to finish this. This is priority. So I definitely, it's hard to balance family life and writing, but this literally on my vision board that I have to finish
Yes.
it. So,
I can so relate. So I'll reveal to you that like a passion project of mine on the side has been writing a travel memoir. And again, it's this personal narrative, and there's a lot of psychology in it, and like again, like family issues and relationship issues through the lens of travel. And I can't stop working on it. I need it to end.
oh my gosh,
But we
I
have
get
this
it. I totally
drive
get it.
and compulsion to write and to tell stories, and you can't. I mean, that is our inner artist coming out, and we shouldn't. I keep thinking, should I just stick this project in a drawer and just be done with it? I'm like, no, I have to see it through. And
Yeah.
that's what writing is. It's like a life that it has a life of its own, and we are
Well,
sort
and
of the
I
the
think
vehicle.
Oh, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it's because, it's put in our heart for a reason, right? So it's like, okay, this is something that you were meant to do and you need to share it because somebody's going to get something out of it, right?
Right.
And I feel like that in almost every book I read, and it's like there was this one book that literally changed my life. I had gotten it right. My daughter was maybe 9 months. I mean, she was still very infant. And it was a very pivotal moment in my life. It was right between where I was ending my full-time W-2 career and trying to open up and establish my business. So yeah, she was about 9 months. She wasn't a year yet. And it was this one book that literally just changed my entire view on life. Like I literally just woke up and said, I can't do this anymore. Like this is not the life I want. I don't want to be abused by my bosses anymore. I know I
Oh my
have
gosh.
better, skills and this and that. And it really pushed me over the edge, the good edge though.
Yes.
And I got out of this, whatever you want to call it, cell cage, whatever it is. And it was so funny. It was written by a psychologist. I went to this retreat, women's entrepreneur retreat, and I met wonderful women. And the one of the speakers was the psychologist. Her name is I have it here. I'll never leave it off my bookshelf. It's called Valerie Rain. She's called Valerie Rain, and it's the patriotic stress disorder. So it's
Wow.
about women and the patriarchy and all that stuff
Hmm.
and everything. And it was such a powerful book. And it's so funny because I had read it right when I got it. And I was like, oh, okay. But then, like, something just said, reread it. You missed something. And I went ahead and I started rereading it, and the words just kind of like flew off the page and were so resonating with me at that moment. And so sometimes we continue to have that message and it continues to bother us, quote unquote, or like whatever, and like warn us. And then all of a sudden, just one day, you finally listen. You finally listen and you're like, no, yeah, it's time. I need to get out of this. And
That's
so I
so
did.
interesting that like books have a personality. Books have like a persistence And I feel like whenever I need a message from a book that I've already read, and is sitting on my shelf, somehow I'll knock it off the shelf by accident, or like something will draw my attention to that book that I've forgotten about. And then you're right, I'll reread it and I'll see something I underlined, or I used to be so like respectful towards my books. I wouldn't mark anything up in them. And then now I'm like underlining and highlighting and putting stuff in the exclamation points in the margins and post-its
Oh
because
yeah.
we want to go back and revisit the message that the author gave us without even knowing it, and that means different things to us at different times in our lives.
Absolutely. You can read that book 5 years from now and it'll be like a different book. I'm a sole believer of that now, especially with that one book. And I will go back and I will reread it and I'll make sure that I didn't miss anything because it talks about how we are our own prisoners. We imprison our mind and how we can get out of it. So it tells us mechanically, scientifically, health-wise what it does to us, but it also tells us the emotional roller coaster and the traumas and how that affects us. And it talks about all the other stuff. And so I've obviously been tapping into that book a lot for this new book that I'm doing, along with a whole bunch of other well-respected authors that I appreciate very much. But I've always been that way. I've always seen that, through books, everybody has a story to tell, whether it's a biography, whether it's just a like made up story, which I never think they're made up. I honestly think they're books that actually happen. But depending, of course. But it's just I love it, right? It's like a language. It's like a different language, and I appreciate it very much. So hopefully I've made book readers out of you guys. And I appreciate you for coming on and talking about your books and your journey. And I'm sure I'll add the links to purchase your books on the description so you guys can check it out and see what she's all about if you don't know who she is. But I really understand that just because it has lawyer on the title, like I know a lot of legal professionals are very hesitant on reading or attending events that are just for lawyers. I'm like, you have a lot to learn because we're all in it together. We're all going through the same things and we're all working together as a team. And just one day, like me, full circle, you'll learn how to navigate the other side. So that's exactly what you guys need to do to alleviate those bottlenecks, those conflict conversations, or anything that may trigger you or anything like that. The more you learn more about yourself, the more you'll learn more about others. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to everything that you've done and everything that you're doing for the profession, for the legal profession, but also beyond. Because you're right, like we write these concepts that are applicable to law, but they really apply to humans and humans like us who have been through tough, hard things and come through the other side. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Bye, guys. Until justice is served, I'll see you next time.